Welcome back to the Liz Wheeler Show. CBS was caught red-handed deceptively editing the 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. Now, this does not surprise me because CBS, like all mainstream media outlets, are propaganda-spewing liars. They are without a doubt in the tank for Kamala Harris. Probably what's worse is they're attempting to manipulate your vote by withholding vital information for you. But the underlying reason why they deceptively edited this interview, which I'm going to show you in just a second, the underlying reason is the most despicable of all. So here's what happened. Kamala Harris has come out of the woodwork finally to do some interviews, but of course she's only doing interviews with friendlies. She would never dare sit down for an honest interview with real questions. 60 Minutes is a pretty safe bet because they're about as biased as you can get. And yet the left and the establishment in Washington, D.C., the Uniparty, still pretends that 60 Minutes is just straight objective journalism. Yeah, right. I think we all know the truth. So Kamala Harris sat down with 60 Minutes, and before the entire episode of 60 Minutes aired, they released a trailer just teasing the content, and this is what it looked like. Take a listen to this very closely, and I'll point out what edit happened after you listen to this.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems
Okay. So first of all, yes, that was a word salad, which we all expect every time Kamala Harris opens her mouth. But essentially, she was asked, Netanyahu's not listening. And she says, well, she kind of contradicts the interviewer, actually, and says, well, a lot of the stuff that's happening over there is at the behest of what we want them to do. So she's saying that the United States is having a say in Netanyahu's actions. That was the teaser for the interview. Fast forward to this weekend when the full interview aired on CBS, and instead of Kamala Harris answering with that answer to the interviewer's question, this is what CBS aired instead. Take a listen.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Okay, so wait a second here. So it's not even a different answer. It's a completely opposite answer. In the first answer, she says, oh, well, Israel's doing what we tell them to do. And in the second answer, she says, actually, we're telling Israel it's time to end the war. So I will tell you guys, obviously I work in media, right? And I'm talking on this podcast right now. My first inclination wasn't to give CBS the benefit of the doubt, but my first reaction was to make sure that this wasn't just a teaser or a clip that they had butted together. For example, when you put a montage together or a highlight reel, you put the most interesting parts of the interview and you crop them and you butt them together so that people can see the highlights of the reel. And I thought, okay, is that what they did? Did they take different things that the interviewer was asking and butt it together, maybe awkwardly with an answer that Kamala Harris gave? And I was close, again, not to giving them the benefit of the doubt, but I just wanted to make sure we as conservatives weren't overreacting since we're so used to the media being liars. Well, no. The answer is no. There's no benefit of the doubt to be given because in the full episode of 60 Minutes, you can read the transcript start to finish. They cut out that answer of Kamala Harris's entirely. It wasn't just placed in a different spot, buried, hidden. The context wasn't changed. It was eliminated completely. It was gone. It was completely gone. So they're liars. They're propagandists. They're in the tank for Kamala Harris. Obviously, we knew these things. They are trying to manipulate your vote by withholding vital information for you. So the underlying reason here is what I want to focus on, because the question should be why. Why did CBS News selectively edit this 60 Minutes interview? Well, we know that they're propaganda. We know they're liars. We know they're trying to paint Kamala Harris in a better light. We know they're trying to withhold information from us in order to manipulate our vote. But there's actually something more. There's something more. I would categorize this as a form of cheating, and it's certainly immoral. It's certainly unethical. But here's the thing. There's a Democrat congresswoman named Slotkin from Michigan who told donors just this past week, this is behind the scenes, told donors that Kamala Harris is underwater in a key swing state, the swing state of Michigan. Well, what's special about Michigan? If you go up to Michigan, Michigan has the largest radical Islamic population of any state in our country if you're talking about per capita. And when I say radical Islam, I don't just mean a Muslim population. I mean Muslims who are sympathetic to radical Islamist ideology, those who are so anti-Israel, they are pro-Hamas, those who are sympathetic to who basically mourned when Soleimani was killed. Those type of people, radical Islamist sympathizers. And so what does Kamala Harris need? Well, she needs to win swing states in order to win the election. One of the key swing states is Michigan. If you want to win Michigan, you have to win over Michigan voters. A lot of this contingent of Michigan voters are sympathetic to radical Islam. One of the tenets of radical Islam is being anti-Israel, wanting to actually wipe Israel off the face of the earth. And so here we have CBS not just running interference to Kamala Harris, which makes them pathetic, dishonest hacks. We have CBS being willing to help Kamala pander to anti-Semites, pander to people who are so anti-Israel that they side with terrorists. It's one of the most despicable things that a mainstream outlet has done in recent memory, because again, they not only changed the context of Kamala Harris's answer, they completely removed it. And think about now, in this context, looking through the lens of Michigan, think about what they changed. Is Benjamin Netanyahu listening? The interviewer asked. And Kamala Harris basically said Netanyahu's doing some things that the United States government told him to do, meaning that the Kamala Harris-Joe Biden administration is on the side of Israel. But wait a second, Kamala Harris needs the votes of anti-Israel terror sympathizers in Michigan. So CBS willingly inserts a different comment from Kamala Harris, insinuating that, is Netanyahu listening? Well, Kamala Harris says in that edited clip, we have told him he needs to put an end to this war. Not that he needs to defeat Hamas, not that he needs to defend his country against terror attacks that seek to annihilate it, but just to end the war. That kind of talking point, that's exactly what comes out of these pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, this contingent of the Democratic Party, and that's who Kamala Harris is trying to pander to, and who CBS is helping her pander to. Guys, email CBS, call them, go on X and tell them, we see what you did. You're not only engaging in propaganda, you're not only one-sided, you're not only partisan, you're not only manipulative, you are actually siding with and helping Kamala Harris try to cozy up to anti-Semites, and it's disgusting. Make your voices heard. This is one of the important things that we do on this show, is we're not just going to sit here and be outraged about it. Let them know you're the consumer. You'll never turn on CBS again if they do this sort of thing. I mean, think about, we are literally 1 year after October 7th. After Hamas invaded Israel in one of the worst terror attacks in the history of the world, raped, murdered, beheaded babies, brutality that comes straight from the bowels of hell. And Kamala Harris is trying to appeal to people who think that's okay. And CBS is helping her. You let CBS know that you will never, ever in a million trillion years tune into their channel if they're going to behave in this way, that they owe us a correction, they owe us an apology. Otherwise, we will continue to hold them accountable vocally and with our consumer behavior. Because remember, your dollar is as powerful as your vote. In all the time that we've been alive, the US dollar has always been the primary currency. But that may not be the case much longer. The US dollar is facing unprecedented inflation. We all know this. We buy groceries and we fill up our cars with gas. We know this. Our politics is getting increasingly unstable, and I'm not just talking about the outcome of the 2024 election in less than a month. I'm talking about, what is 2025 going to look like? As if this whole scenario isn't scary enough, the government's looking to take control of our money with a new digital dollar. Remember last week when we talked about the UN's pact for the future? Yeah, they're going to force us to use a digital dollar, and don't think they won't try to control us by freezing our bank accounts when we try to buy something that they don't want, or forcing us to do something else with our money. That's why it's never been more important to take control over our wealth. Don't let your life savings become a casualty of either failing banks or currency wars or tyrannical politicians. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. My husband and I just did this because we want to protect our money and our family. With the finest products, amazing customer service, a buyback commitment, American Hartford Gold has a 5-star rating from thousands of reviews. And best of all, American Hartford Gold supports content like this that's committed to bringing you the truth. They're unafraid to stand next to us. So tell them I sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. Call them now. You can click the link in this description of this episode, or you can call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172, or text Liz to 998899. Again, the phone number is 866 996-5172 or text Liz to 998899. Kamala Harris is also making the rounds on other TV shows such as The View. And we know why she does this. We talked about her appearance earlier in the week on the sex podcast, Call Her Daddy. The viewership of Call Her Daddy is young women who lean left, but only about 40% of them are actually registered to vote. So Kamala Harris wants to take this population of people, even as she debases herself by appearing on a tawdry podcast that glorifies debauchery. She wants to get those people to vote for her. That's why she's going on that show. Well, she went on The View as well, and this is what she said.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
I actually love that answer. I have my criticism of Sunny Hostin, of course, because she was essentially acting in a racist way towards Nikki Haley, who is not my favorite politician, as you know, but Sunny Hostin was like, your real name's not Nikki. You're trying to whitewash your history. Your real name is an Indian name. And meanwhile, Sunny's real name is not Sunny. She also changed her name to a stage name to appear on stage. So she's not my favorite person, but it was an interesting question, I thought, because Kamala Harris is not running on Joe Biden's record. She tries to distance herself from it as if she's not the sitting vice president of the United States. She makes all these promises. When I'm president, I'll do this. When I get there, I'm going to close the border. I'll give hurricane aid. You're there. You can do that right now. And she's not. So, and she didn't distance herself. She said, I've been a part of every big decision. Well, okay, then inflation is your fault. The price of gas is your fault. The price of groceries is your fault. The war in Ukraine is your fault. The border crisis is your fault. Every single thing that the American people are suffering from, that's a result of the Biden administration. Kamala Harris just took responsibility for. So remember that when you cast your ballot. Kamala Harris also appeared on Stephen Colbert's show. It is an interesting combination of media that she's chosen to do now that she's finally doing media. And this is what she said.
Polling shows that a lot of people, especially independent voters, really want this to be a change election, and that they tend to break for you in terms of thinking about change. You are a member of the President administration. Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one
Does that mean
change.
she can actually define what a woman is now?
But also, I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump. And so when we think about the significance of what this next generation of leadership looks like, were I to be elected president, it is about, frankly, I love the American people, and I believe in our country. I love that it is our character and nature to be an ambitious people. We have aspirations, we have dreams, we have incredible work ethic, and I just believe that we can create and build upon the success we've achieved in a way that we continue to grow opportunity, and in that way grow the strength of our nation. So for example, my economic policies, I think of it, and I've named it as creating an opportunity economy. So it's about things like investing in small businesses. I love our small businesses.
Oh my goodness, we're an ambitious people, she said. Yeah, ambitious enough that you sleep with Willie Brown to get your first political appointment. That kind of ambition, Kamala Harris. Didn't her people give her an elevator pitch for her entire campaign before they sent her out on this show? I'm not Donald Trump. Okay, so if you're not Donald Trump, then you are insinuating that you reject the Donald Trump record, because he's also running on the fact that he's been president already. We know what he's going to be. It's not just promises, empty promises that he's making. So you're not Donald Trump. So you are rejecting the lowest unemployment rate for women that we've ever seen, the lowest unemployment rate for Black people, for Hispanic people, for veterans, for disabled people. You are rejecting low inflation, meaning affordable gas, affordable groceries, affordable housing. You are rejecting the fact that Donald Trump ended foreign wars. You are rejecting border security and a border wall. You are rejecting stopping the invasion of our cities. You are rejecting Donald Trump's record on law and order. You're rejecting all these things that the American people like. The American people were better off when Donald Trump was president, but Kamala Harris can't even articulate what she is for. She only wants to be against this boogeyman, Donald Trump. You should be afraid. He's coming after your rights. Well, I don't know about you. Maybe there are some voters out there who fall for that kind of stuff, but I have faith in the fact that the American voter is smart, and it might be a better accusation or a better fear-mongering tactic if Donald Trump hadn't already been president. But why would he be a dictator if he's already been president and he wasn't? Why would he be authoritarian now if he was already president and he wasn't? Why would he do all these things that would destroy democracy if he was already president and he didn't do any of those things? Seems to me like a very lame sort of way to campaign. Kamala Harris also appeared on the Howard Stern show. Take a look.
When you ran for Senate, it was bittersweet, right? You won, which is great. But you said, I ate a whole bag of Doritos that night. That's your thing, Doritos?
Oh, I love Doritos. Original nacho. But let me just tell you, it was a family-sized bag.
Wow.
I sat on the couch.
But you're in good shape. Are you like
I work
nausea?
out every morning.
Did you work out this morning?
I did.
Where did you work out?
On the elliptical at the hotel.
Oh, they bring one up to your room?
Yeah.
Nice. How long do you go on the elliptical?
Half an hour to 45 minutes.
You're not bored out of your skull on that thing?
I'm watching a variety of things. That's how I catch
Morning
it.
Joe?
Yeah.
He's
sometimes.
something, huh?
Yeah.
That Morning Joe.
Uh-huh.
I love that guy.
I do too. Joe Scarborough. Yeah.
A former Republican.
Yes.
He can't vote in his own
But
party.
he loves our country. I don't agree with him on every issue, but we agree on I think the most important at this moment for sure.
That's just a softball interview. It's just painful to watch. Okay, you work out, you go on your elliptical. Well, meanwhile, people can't afford to live, to buy houses. Their cities are overtaken with violent crime, and the border crisis grows worse by the day, by the literal day. And terrorists, actual terrorists that you allowed into our country, are seeking to harm us on Election Day. This episode today is sponsored by First Cup Coffee. You can go to firstcup.com, use my promo code Liz for 10% off your order. That's firstcup.com, promo code Liz for 10% off your order. I need 10 of you today watching this episode to go to firstcup.com, use promo code Liz for 10% off. So a terrorist attack was thwarted here in the United States of America. This is a pretty scary type of terrorist attack. What happened was on Tuesday, the Department of Justice announced that an Afghan national by the name of Nasir Ahmad Tawhidi, he's 27 years old, was arrested for plotting to conduct a terror attack on Election Day here in the United States on behalf of ISIS. He also reportedly had an underage co-conspirator involved in an interesting fact about that underage co-conspirator we'll discuss in just a moment. Tawhidi was arrested in America's heartland in Oklahoma City. He had taken steps to, quote, liquidate his family's assets, to resettle members of his family overseas. He'd acquired AK-47 rifles and ammunition, and he intended to commit a terrorist attack in the United States. This, according to the Department of Justice. He had also assessed, viewed, and saved ISIS propaganda on his iCloud, on his Google account, participated in pro-ISIS Telegram groups, and contributed to a charity which fronts for and funnels money to ISIS. All this per the DOJ. Now, you might be asking, wow, that's really scary. What was the terror attack that he was going to commit? Was he going to shoot people up? Was he going to blow people up? Where was this going to happen? How did this guy wind up in the United States of America? Well, that's where it gets really interesting. He came to the United States on a special immigration visa on September 9th of 2021. That's a very important date, September 9th of 2021. He came during the chaotic and disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan that was overseen by President Joe Biden, Kamala Harris being the, quote, last person in the room when Joe Biden made the decision to withdraw in that fashion. You can hear her say this right now. Take a listen.
You just made a really big decision. Afghanistan.
Yes.
Were you the last person in the room?
Yes.
And you feel comfortable?
I do. And I'm going to add to that. This is a president who has an extraordinary amount of courage.
No ifs, ands, or buts. Yes, Kamala Harris was the last person in the room. So here's where it gets interesting. Tens of thousands of Afghan refugees, as you remember, were quickly thrown into this, what's called a special immigration program, a special visa immigration program. It's meant for translators, those who had assisted the United States, other Afghan citizens who had put their lives on the line, who would be under target by the Taliban for having cooperated with the U.S. And we all knew at the time that because of the way Kamala Harris and Joe Biden withdrew from Afghanistan, that bad guys, just like this guy, Thwarted, would take advantage of this program, that they would infiltrate with, whether it's translators or others who would cooperate, other Afghans who had cooperated with the U.S., and they would come here with the intent to harm us. But remember what happened. When we warned about this, when we raised concerns, we were not only dismissed and ignored, we were gaslit. We were told that we were crazy to think this. We were told that all of these individuals were, quote, properly vetted. Now, I think you can answer that question for yourself of, well, what happened? Was Thwarted actually properly vetted or not? And this, by the way, is the exact same playbook that border czar Kamala Harris and the rest of this administration use. This individual might not technically be an illegal alien, but this is what they do. They usher the migrants in under this mass migration. They bend the rules so that they can technically call them lawful non-citizens, and then they want to naturalize them and make them citizens. Well, that's what happened here. He wasn't a citizen, but he was technically lawful. And meanwhile, American citizens were left in Afghanistan in jeopardy, waiting to be harmed. By the way, if you remember, Donald Trump warned that this exact scenario would happen. He warned that if Kamala Harris and Joe Biden brought so-called Afghan refugees without proper vetting into our nation, in the wake of that withdrawal, that we would face a terror attack. Take a listen.
The country has never been more unsafe. We have people pouring in through our southern border, which everyone's forgetting about right now because of the travesty of Afghanistan. And if you look at the people coming in by the hundreds, by the thousands, and these are not the people necessarily that wanted the protection.
Right.
These are people. So are they terrorists? How many terrorists are coming in? And
yeah, are these terrorists? How many terrorists are coming in? That's a question we should ask ourselves in the wake of this arrest. Thank God that this terror attack was thwarted. Thank God this terrorist was not able to inflict harm on people. Thank God nobody was killed. But what about the others? Surely nobody is naive enough to believe that he was the only one. We all know that terrorists have crossed the southern border because of Kamala Harris's open borders. We all know that there are others who infiltrated these Afghan refugees that were flown, improperly vetted into the United States. Where are they now? What are they doing? When are they going to harm us? Will they be caught? How many will get away with it? And who will suffer as a result of this? The only person responsible for this is Kamala Harris. The radical left wants to eliminate the court's conservative majority by packing the Supreme Court with their own hand-picked justices. We're talking judicial activists to get the political outcomes that they want. Even President Biden has gotten into the act by making reforming the court one of his final priorities before he leaves office. But don't be fooled by that euphemism, because a euphemism is exactly what it is. Their end game is just court packing. At First Liberty, they have a great name for this. They call this assault on the court what it really is. They call it a Supreme Court coup. And it is. It's a coup. The frightening thing is that come January, their plan could become our nation's reality. Simple majority votes in the House and the Senate, combined with the president's signature, could turn their plan to pack the court into the law of our land. That's why First Liberty is sounding the alarm. And they need you. And they need me to join them. If we take action together, if we unite our voices, we can put a stop to the radical left's plan to take control of the Supreme Court. As the 2024 election approaches, we need to do three things. Number one, find out where each of your candidates stands on the radical issue of packing the court or purging the court. Number two, share what you learn with everyone you know. And number three, do your civic duty and vote. The future of the court, of preserving it as an independent judiciary, is literally in our hands. If we lose the court, we will lose the country. That's why First Liberty is taking action, and they need all of us to join them. With patriots like you standing for the Supreme Court, we can safeguard the independence of the judiciary, just as the Founding Fathers intended. Go to supremecoup.com/Liz. That's supremecoup.com/Liz to learn how you can help stop the radical left's takeover of the Supreme Court. A bombshell new database called Stop the Harm exposes hospitals and doctors all across the United States performing transgender surgeries and prescribing puberty-blocking medication and cross-sex hormones to children. Yes, children. How many children, you might ask? According to this database, 14,000 children under the age of 17 and a half. Now, remember, the left claims that this never happens. The left tells us over and over again that we're making this up, that transgender surgeries never happen. Kids aren't trans, they say. Well, the hospital data proves that the left is lying to us. As Stop the Harm reports, this is the exact number of children. 5,747 children underwent a sex change surgical procedure. 8,579 children received cross-sex hormones or puberty blockers. And over 60,000 prescriptions for these drugs were written for children. Now, it's very important for us to note here that these kids were groomed into this ideology. This is an ideology. This is not science. It's certainly not medicine. Medicine is intended to treat something that is wrong, to heal children. This does not heal gender disorder, surgery, puberty blocking, or cross-sex hormones. Over 90% of children, remember this number, over 90% of children with gender dysphoria will outgrow that feeling once they have hit puberty, once they become adults. So if we actually wanted to help young people with gender disorders, we would send them to counseling. We would wait for them to grow up, and we would adamantly refuse to transition them. But this, of course, is ideology driven, and it's also driven by money. You'll never guess how much money these hospitals and doctors profited off mutilating these children in the name of gender ideology. We have with us today the director of programs at Do No Harm. They're the group that's behind the Stop the Harm database, Michelle Havrilla. Michelle, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me today.
Okay, Michelle, can you explain to us first what this database is and how you collected the information to put in this database?
So this database is a comprehensive overview of all sex change treatments that were performed on minors, so anyone under the age of 17 and a half, at all U.S.-based facilities, U.S.-based healthcare facilities within all 50 states in the country.
And how did you get this information? Is this publicly available?
This is publicly available claims data, so anyone can access this data or purchase this data for analysis. It's a common practice among insurance companies to use this, but what we've done is a very unique analysis of the data to look specifically at sex change treatments in children throughout the country.
And we're told, of course, by the left that sex changes on children don't happen, but what did you find when you were analyzing this data?
So analysis of the data showed that approximately 14,000 children throughout the country under the age of 17 and a half have received some type of sex change treatment, whether it be surgery such as a body modification surgery, hormones, or puberty blockers. On all totaling, in terms of claims submitted, $120 million over a 4-year period between 2019 and 2023.
Oh my goodness. So 14,000 children, again, not to repeat myself, we're told by the left that this doesn't happen. $120 million. I mean, I'm not as fast at math as one might hope, so I can't do the math on the fly of how much that costs per children. But it shows a pretty large profit incentive for these hospital systems to perform these surgeries and then hide them. It's definitely a large charge from what we've seen submitted over the last 4 years. And really what we're showing in our database is a floor. It's a very, very conservative estimate. And we suspect that it's probably more than what we're just scratching with the surface of this data. What do you mean by that when you say it's a floor? Do you think that there are hospital systems that don't report it, or because this is insurance data, or what do you mean?
It is. So we specifically looked at insurance data. So unfortunately, we had to exclude some data that were just not publicly available. So Kaiser, for one, does not allow their data to be public. We don't have information on self-pay, and we also don't have information on charity pay that may have been happening throughout the children's hospital and the hospitals themselves. The other thing is that we were very conservative in our methodology, meaning that in order to ensure the procedure or the prescription that was given to a child, we matched it with a gender diagnosis code or an ICD-10 code to make sure that really there was not any ambiguity in what we were presenting.
Right, because if I understand correctly, puberty blocking medication is also used sometimes for precocious puberty.
It can be, yes.
It can be. So I would imagine, and you can correct me if you have information that contradicts this, but I would imagine that both self-pay is a very common way, because a lot of times these transitions are happening among upper middle class white people. They're transitioning their children, but also Kaiser Permanente, we know for a fact, has been engaged in transing kids.
It Could very well be. One thing I will say, when we look specifically at the state of California, where we see Kaiser is probably the number one payer in the state. So specifically, when we looked at California, we saw a total of $23 million that submitted charges within that time frame of 2019 to 2023. So without the addition of Kaiser to that, we suspect that it's probably higher than what we're actually seeing at this point.
And what's the reaction been since you've released this data?
So far, it's been very positive. People are really very enlightened by what we have presented and what we're really shedding light on and what's happening throughout the country. And it really speaks to the fact that this is happening throughout hospitals in the United States. And interestingly, really it's happening in most non-pediatric hospitals, outside facilities that are really performing these type of procedures on children.
Interesting. And what I find interesting, honestly, is the fact that all of this is publicly available. So anybody watching or listening to this show right now could theoretically get information on whether hospitals in their cities are performing this procedure, right?
That is correct. And you can see that on the database as well. So we included any facility, any US-based facility with that has a reported claim for a minor with a sex change treatment. So if you wanted to look at California, yeah, you can see all of that information on the database.
Oh, tell people how to get to that, because I know I know my audience, and I know they're going to want to go right now and look at the hospitals in their neighborhoods and cities and make a ruckus about that. They're going to want to write emails. They're going to want to call in. They're going to want to write op-eds. They're going to want to tweet. They're going to want to let their communities know that this is happening right to your own kids and kids of people that you know.
Absolutely. So they can go to the stoptheharmdatabase.com and you'll be able to find it there. You can also find, if you would go to the Do No Harm Medicine website, we'll be able to find a link to see it there.
Okay. And guys, we'll post the link to both of those things in the description of this episode so that you can find it really easily, because you should make your voices heard. Michelle, this is an incredible project. I mean, your organization's pretty cool. I didn't know that much about your organization until this database came out. But if you want to tell people what your work is focused on, that'd be great.
Yeah, we have two missions within our organization. One is to really remove DEI from medicine in general. So from medical schools, from hospitals, we really want to promote merit in medicine and really taking care of the patient as we should. And then that second aspect is protecting children from the dangers of gender ideology.
And the DEI thing, we've talked about that on the show, so everyone listening and watching is pretty familiar with this. Where does this start from, is my question to you? Because you've obviously done deep research into this. Is this something that just happens sort of organically because of woke professors in a classroom? Is this happening because of the donors to the medical schools? Where is this actually emanating from?
Yeah, I will say that's not, from my perspective, I can't say 100% certain where it's emanating from. But what's most alarming is how pervasive it has become in the medical field. And myself as a clinician, we're really losing that aspect of merit and focusing on the individual patient as opposed to this very harmful DEI ideology.
That's right, because you're a nurse practitioner.
I am, by training. That's correct. Yes.
So you see that in every day, and it is scary. I mean, if you think about going into surgery is scary enough as it is for patients, but to think that the doctors and nurses, medical providers, mid-level providers surrounding you aren't necessarily there because they were the best and the brightest to get in to medical school. They might be there because, I don't know, their sex or the color of their skin or how they identify or the pronouns on their badge. Like, that's a scary thing. No one wants to have surgery performed on them based on someone that's essentially a token hire, not someone that's there because they deserve to be there because they're smart and capable and talented. How do we get rid of that?
Well, I think the main thing from our perspective, especially with the children, with the hospital database, is exposure. So we want to shed light on what's happening throughout the country and what's happening in our medical facilities. And so being able to highlight what is happening to young children, to minor children who really don't have the ability to consent, and also who is providing this care, which facilities, which providers, and making sure that the general public as well as legislators know what's happening in their backyards.
Yeah, and that's the first thing that has to happen, guys, before we see political change in our nation, is people have to understand, even in the face of media that lies to them or political opposition that gaslights them. We have to understand that it is actually happening. We saw this, by the way, in the last couple of years. First, we were told, there's no pornographic books in elementary schools. We were told there's no critical race theory being taught. And until parents looked over their kids' shoulders on Zoom school during COVID and saw it for themselves, maybe that gaslighting and that lying worked. But once we saw it for ourselves, that's what caused the sea change. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for creating this database and giving parents and Americans all over the country, equipping us with the information that we need to fight back against this. Michelle Havrilla of Do No Harm. We're going to post the links to everything you guys need to know in the description to this episode. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I've got something really exciting to share. They say no one reads anymore, but I know with you guys, this is not true. My audience loves to read. And our best and most important ideas are still captured in print, thank goodness, which is why we have decided at Blaze Media to launch a premium quarterly magazine called Frontier. I'm holding the first issue right now. This thing is beautiful. Frontier is packed with thoughtful commentary, stunning photography, and original journalism that highlights the people who refuse to back down. In the first issue alone, we feature Chris Rufo, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, and this is not just a magazine. We are planting a flag in the ground. I think you're going to love it. Frontier's just the beginning. As part of our new Blaze Unlimited membership, you will get exclusive access to Frontier delivered right to your door, along with a whole lot more. Blaze Unlimited is about taking another step forward, fighting back against state-run media, propaganda, the forces trying to tear down the foundations of this country. As a founding member of Blaze Unlimited, you'll receive a limited edition founding members card, even more behind-the-scenes content, VIP event access, and here's the big one: the chance to have your voice heard. We want you to help shape the future of Blaze Media and push back against the mainstream machine that's doing everything it can to silence the truth. This membership is about more than just sitting on the sidelines. It's about actively joining the mission to defend free speech and uphold the American way of life. If you're ready to take the next step in this fight, go to blazeunlimited.com/Liz to claim your spot. Don't wait. Founding member spots are limited because we know that this is not going to be for everyone. But if it's for you, let's stand together and push back and keep the spirit of America alive. Join Blaze Unlimited today. That's blazeunlimited.com/Liz. All right, it's time for some headlines. These are headlines the mainstream media doesn't want you to see. The first one, Vice Presidential running mate Tim Walz has called to abolish the Electoral College. He always caveats this. This isn't the first time that he's said that he wanted to abolish the Electoral College, but he always caveats it by saying, I know that this isn't the world that we live in, but I'm a national popular vote guy. Okay, so let's talk about what this means. This, first of all, means that the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz campaign thinks that Donald Trump electorally stands a better chance to win the election than they do. They want to change the rules. This is the thing about Democrats, right? They want to change the rules when they are the underdog. They don't want to figure out how to earn the vote of the American people. They don't want to figure out how to win by winning the electoral votes of each state. They only want to change the rules if they are losing, which I think is an expression of their character, because if you always try to change the rules, this is exactly what they did in 2020 with election rigging. They didn't want to play by the rules, so they changed the rules to make it easier for them to win, to cheat, to rig the election. But here's the problem with abolishing the Electoral College. The Electoral College is sometimes a weedy type of topic. People are like, yeah, why don't we do a national popular vote? Isn't that democratic? Isn't that how democracies work? And the answer to that is yes. That's how direct democracies or pure democracies work. But the reason that we don't have a pure democracy was intentional. The Founding Fathers understood that the answer to the question, how long do pure democracies or direct democracies last? The answer to that question is not very long, because what happens in a direct democracy is because everyone is able to vote directly on every issue, the mob or the will of the mob becomes precedent. So becomes prominent, I should say. And so what happens is anytime a mob gets enraged, they can change a law, they can change a rule, they can change the course of our country. There's no structure protecting your right to free speech, for example. So all you have to do is whip up a mob and you can change, you can violate someone's rights. And what happens then is you don't have a democracy anymore. So our founding fathers understood that, well, we don't want that. We don't want the will of the enraged mob to rule our country. So they gave us the Electoral College. The other reason it's so important is because our country is humongous. Our country is quite large. It's much larger than most other countries, certainly other Western countries. And we have a lot of different places in the country whose priorities are slightly different. And what I mean by that is think of New York City versus Oklahoma. Well, Oklahoma cares a lot more about farming than New York City does, so they want their interests reflected in national laws. Whereas New York City doesn't care so much about farming, they want their interests reflected in national laws. If we didn't have the Electoral College, then the only people whose interests would be reflected in national laws and federal laws would be the cities that have the leftist urban centers that have the largest concentration of votes. We'd be ruled by the coastal elites, as they say. So the Electoral College prevents all federal laws from serving only the coastal elites. We have states that are intended to be separate entities. That's what our federalist system is. That's how it's set up. And it is complicated. I understand even talking about it right now gets in the weeds, but it's important that we protect it. The only reason Tim Walz wants to get rid of it is because he can't win by playing by the rules, so he wants to change the rules. But we should reject it because our country would cease to exist real fast if we did away with the Electoral College. Okay, second headline. President Trump was on Andrew Schultz's podcast. If you're young, you're probably familiar with Andrew Schultz's podcast. If you're not so young, then you may not be familiar with Andrew Schultz's podcast, but that's okay. I'll tell you about it. Andrew Schultz's podcast is a very popular podcast for young men specifically. So while we see Kamala Harris going on really nasty sex podcasts like Call Her Daddy, Trump is going on podcasts that appeal to young men like Theo Vaughn or Andrew Schultz, which is an interesting campaign strategy, one I'm in favor of. I don't think that Trump should just cave on abortion, trying to pander to young women. I think he should actually try to recruit young men who are already conservative-minded to actually turn out and vote. That's what he's doing by appearing on these podcasts. But that's not even the headline. The headline here is Trump admitted on Schultz's podcast that Biden has one ability that Trump doesn't have. Take a listen.
Over the last week, I have to, when we talk about funny or sad, I think it's more sad than funny.
Yeah.
He has one ability I don't have.
Yeah.
He sleeps. He can sleep. This guy goes on a beach and he lays down on one of those, 6 ounce, they weigh 6 ounces and you can't lift it.
Yeah.
They're meant for children.
Yeah.
Young people and old people to lift.
Yeah.
They're aluminum, hollowed aluminum.
Yeah.
They weigh very little, and he can't lift. And somebody convinced him he looks good in a bathing suit. And when you're 82, typically bathing suits aren't going to make you look great.
Right,
you're not going to be enhanced. Yeah. All right? It's just one of those things. I can't be sure about that, but typically you don't.
Depends what he's packing. He could.
I don't know what the hell he's packing, but I don't want to, and I don't want to know either. I don't know, but he has an ability to fall asleep while on camera. He can lie down on one of those things, and in minutes, he's stone cold out.
How does he do it?
And he's got cameras because he's the president, so they have cameras on him.
Yeah.
And then they show him sleeping on the beach.
Yeah.
You'll never see me sleeping in front of camera.
Listen, if you do not think that Donald Trump is hysterical, regardless of your political affiliation, even if you don't agree with a single policy of Donald Trump, if you don't understand, if you don't acknowledge even the objective reality that he's hysterical, then you need to have more fun in your life because that guy is just straight up funny. He's, I would argue, funnier than any stand-up comedian that I can think of. It's also, by the way, not an accident that he's putting on that kind of performance on that podcast because who's he trying to appeal to? He's trying to appeal to young men, and what better way to appeal to young men than to be like, this guy's a loser, he's weak, he falls asleep, he can't even pick up what a child can pick up. He is discrediting this guy, Joe Biden's manliness, his masculinity in front of a bunch of young men, and I mean, you gotta love it. Like I said, if you don't think that's funny, then you are boring and you need to enjoy life more. Okay. This next headline is much more serious. I'm going to read it. It's a post from Dr. Simone Gold, brought this to my attention. She, on X, posted and said, wow, a study involving 1.7 million children has found that myocarditis and pericarditis, you guys remember what that is? That's the inflammation of the heart, only appeared in children who had received COVID mRNA vaccines. Not a single unvaccinated child in the group suffered from those heart-related problems. And she then goes on to say, this is absolutely shocking. I'm going to read from the actual study. It says, among both adolescents and children, myocarditis and pericarditis were documented only in the vaccinated groups with rates of 27 and 10 cases per million after first and second doses, respectively. Now, remember, we were told, again, they lie to us. They take just a grain of truth and they twist it. We all know that there were cases of myocarditis and pericarditis. So they didn't deny that that was happening. They just said, well, sometimes it can happen as the result of COVID. And you and I were like, well, wait a second. It seems to me that it's happening right after someone gets the mRNA vaccine, the COVID jab. It doesn't seem like it's happening after people get COVID, the virus. It seems like it's being caused by the vax. We were told that that's not the case. Well, this study proves that that is the case. We were right. And it gives me no pleasure to say that I was right. In fact, it's very sad that this was a serious heart event that's probably going to have lifelong repercussions for these mostly young men. I mean, some young women, but it's mostly concentrated among young men. They're going to suffer the repercussions of this forever, and it could have been avoided. They didn't need the vaccine. Most of them were forced to get it either because of societal pressure, because it was mandated for school or mandated for their jobs, for colleges when I say school, or for their jobs. They were never at risk of dying and never at high risk at all of dying from COVID-19. This was just a exercise in tyranny and control for the medical establishment. And you and I were right to identify that at the time. And yet we were told that we were crazy. Well, we weren't. So the moral of that story is follow your gut, because you're probably right if you look at the facts, and definitely don't listen to the experts. All right. This one is my favorite one of the day. I'm not going to lie to you. This is Donald Trump being hilarious. Take a look.
Thank you very much. Where's gays for Trump? You don't look gay.
You know good. He said you don't look gay.
We did great with the gay population.
Okay. Just to relive that, Donald Trump at a campaign event, thanking different people for being part of his campaign. And he looks out over the audience, as he often does, and he calls out people's names. He goes, where are gays for Trump? Because there's a big contingent of gay people who are voting for Donald Trump. They are not part of the LGBTQIA mafia. They are free-thinking gays. And he goes, where's the group gays for Trump? And then somebody raises their hand and says, I'm gays for Trump. And Trump looks at him and goes, you don't look gay. And I think it's, first of all, again, if you don't think that's funny, then you need to enjoy your life more, because that's just funny, even if you don't agree with Trump. But it also shows me two things. Sometimes I look at Trump and I think, dang, this guy is unflappable. He stood on the stage in Butler, Pennsylvania, the exact same place that he'd been literally shot in the head 12 weeks before. He stood there, a bell rang at the moment he was shot, and there wasn't even a flicker of PTSD. And I just think, wow, this guy is made different. This guy is really, really just, I mean, unflappable, just unreal, the strength and the courage of this guy. And then he says something like this, and I'm like, and he's also a boomer. Because who other than boomers would be like, well, you don't look gay to me. Funniest thing ever. It also shows, by the way, that he is unafraid to fight back against false accusations in the mainstream media, portrayal and vilification of him, because he's just going to say what comes into his head, even something that's pretty obviously politically incorrect, like telling someone, you don't look gay. Again, if you don't think that's funny, you should enjoy your life more. All right, another serious story. There is a new survey out. I'm going to bring this up. Charlie Kirk posted this on X, and this is not good news at all. This is something we've talked about on this show. Clearly, we need to talk about it more because people's actions haven't changed yet. This is what Charlie posted. According to a new survey by George Barna, only 51% of people of faith plan to vote this November. This translates into 41 million born-again Christians who will not vote, and 32 million mainline Christians who will not vote. Just sit tight for a second and think about the enormity of what this means, the implications. 41 million evangelicals and 32 million mainline Christians are not going to vote in this election. So what that means is if Kamala Harris wins, and I'm sorry to sound harsh here, if Kamala Harris wins, then it's the fault of Christians who sit out and don't vote. Because those are humongous numbers. In 2020, the margins between Donald Trump winning and losing in swing states and districts was sometimes as low as 10, 20, 30,000. And now we're talking about 30 million and 40 million. Christians, understand the implications. First of all, what you do matters. What you do matters, both in what you say and in the actions that you engage in. And no, Donald Trump is not perfect. But are you? What we are weighing is which candidate will do better to uphold and protect the dignity of each human being. Because if you are a Christian, if you believe that the Bible is the word of God, then you believe that each of us are made in the image and likeness of God, that we have inherent rights given to us by God, and that government doesn't have a right to violate that, but our government does. And the politicians which administer our government, there are different politicians, and they make different decisions about what the government does when it comes to violating our God-given rights or protecting those God-given rights. And Donald Trump, the comparison is ludicrous. Donald Trump protects the dignity of life so far and beyond what Kamala Harris says. This should be an easy vote. No, Donald Trump's not perfect on life issues. I'm more pro-life than Donald Trump. I hope you're more pro-life than Donald Trump. But he was, even notwithstanding that statement, Donald Trump was the most pro-life president of our lifetime. Kamala Harris thinks that all abortion is okay. First, abortion pill, first trimester abortion, second trimester abortion, third trimester abortion. Her running mate voted against providing medical care for babies born alive after botched abortions. That is so demonic. It's child sacrifice. Immigration? Did God through the Bible not give us nations? We are a sovereign nation. It is required for a sovereign nation to protect our sovereignty by having borders. Doesn't mean that we are not welcoming of the sojourner. It does not mean that we are not giving charity to the poor. It does not mean that we are not treating others with the love of Christ. It means that our first priority is to protect the dignity of our families, and securing our border is the first step that we have to take to do that. Once we have secured the border and prevented terrorists and murderers and rapists from coming into our nation and harming us, once we have protected our systems, our institutions from being overwhelmed by mass migration, then we can invite people who want to become part of the American dream to join us in this country. But if you want to think of borders from a big picture, think how many people in the world want to come to the United States? Well, the number of people who answered that survey, the number is more than the current citizenry of the United States. And we know that we can't allow everyone who wants to come here to come because it's simply we don't have room for them. We don't have enough resources for them. We don't have houses and food and electricity and water for everyone. So we do have to pick and choose at some point. And picking and choosing should first and foremost require us to provide security for our country and the values that we hold dear and for our families. Those are just two issues. I mean, you can talk about the actual dignity of the family, of marriage. You can talk about how much it costs to have children. You can talk about groceries and gas prices, and you can talk about all these different issues, but it's simply inarguable that Donald Trump, for Christians, is the candidate to vote for. And if 40 million evangelicals and 30 million mainline Protestants and Catholics sit out and don't vote, then the responsibility will be on those people if Kamala Harris is elected president. And let me tell you, you won't even have the opportunity to practice your faith in the public sphere if Kamala Harris becomes president. It is Christians. Christians are called to faithful citizenship. That is to participate in the election, the political process. I know that some pastors, some priests act like politics don't matter, but that's simply not true. History has shown us that politics is incredibly important for the Christian family and for pursuing our faith, and our country is no exception to that. So this is a pretty serious, severe even. The consequences will be severe if Christians don't take action. I hope that if you are Christian, that you're going to vote. And if you are Christian and you have Christian friends, you go to a Christian church, that you encourage your family and your friends and those who attend church with you to vote as well, because we may not have the right to practice our faith and worship our God the way that we choose if we allow the radical communist left to take over. And those are the 5 headlines for today. The mainstream media they certainly don't want you to know about some of those, because some of these stories play into, or favor, I should say, the left. If you like what we do around here and you want a great way to let other people know that you're watching and listening, you're going to love all the Blaze Media merchandise available at shopblazemedia.com. Everything from the Blaze Heritage and Blaze Media collections to Agua Donkeys and our Trump Vance 2024 merch. We have jackets, t-shirts, mugs, flags, and a whole lot more. There's so much that you are going to love. Go to shopblazemedia.com today. Check out all the cool stuff available from Blaze Media, and be sure you use the promo code BLAZE10 to get 10% off your entire order. That's shopblazemedia.com, promo code BLAZE10 for 10% off. Do it today. Guys, if you haven't signed up for my newsletter, go to LizWheelerNewsletter.com. Drop your email. We basically have content for you every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it's a new show. On Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, it is an email newsletter. So go to LizWheelerNewsletter.com, sign up, become part of our crew, keep in touch, and I'd love to see all your guys' comments on that. So thanks for being part of it. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.